Hello, my name is Nikolai Yusupov, and in this video I'd like to show you how to set up IV arm test trainer when you're doing a station for venipuncture, right, or cannulation for IV access. So let me go step by step to show you some of the tips and tricks in order to have the station be a successful station. So first of all, you're going to need, you're going to need some artificial blood. And here I have a new container of essentially from Nasco from lime form, and we're going to make some artificial blood. So this is how the container comes. You notice this is sealed, and this container, right, this has been used. This is an old container of blood. Now, very important, once we make this new container, I want to make sure I label when I made it, right? So today is 9/19/21. And whenever we are going to use this blood, once we're finished using it for our IV test trainer, we're then going to put it back into this empty bottle so that we could recycle it. And this way we could save money, right, by not emptying this out into the drain, right? So how you're going to do this? We have to fill this, right, with water in order to make blood, and we gotta make sure we shake it well. So open the water, fill, right? So this creates artificial blood. And I'm going to show you how we're going to connect the IV test trainer and pressurize the system so that when you are cannulating the veins of the mannequin, you're able to essentially get flashback or visual confirmation that there is a return of blood so that you can see that. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So I'm going to fill this up with water, right, to create my container. And after we're done using it, again, don't pour it down the sink, right? This costs money, so we want to reuse it, right? And essentially this is why. So I want to make sure I mix it well, cover it, shake it up, add remainder of water. Right, so now it's labeled, we have our blood, and what we're going to do now is very important, right? We have to connect this test trainer to these bags that we're going to use, and we have to pressurize the system. Now, sometimes what may happen, these connections don't always connect well. So what you can do, this is a tip for you guys, is you could open, while you're setting this up, open some warm water and take this ends of this test trainer, right, and put this in the sink, right, and let the warm water run on it. And what this does, right, the warm water, once it becomes warm, will make it more maneuverable, so that once you're making your connections, you're able to do it more easily, right? So sometimes you will have to wait for the water to get warm, but this is essentially what you're going to do if you're having a tough time connecting them. So once this end is warm, right, you will be connecting them like so. Now, what I do first is I make sure these clamps are closed, right? So this clamp is closed, so there's no leaks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of my blood in here. And then I'm going to dilute this further. So this much, and then I'm going to put some more water. And then, as I said, once we're done using this, we're going to pour it back into our container to reuse it, right? So, very important, you keep a clean station. So I don't want to dirty anything. Right? So now that this is connected, so this is going to be my top bag, and I'm going to place it on my crash cart, and it's going to hang down over here, right? So, and what I'm going to do, it doesn't matter which one you connect first, right? You want to connect one end so it's flushed. So because I ran the warm water, you notice it was easier to connect it, right? And always put something underneath. So here I have some chocks that will basically prevent water or imitation blood, in this case, going onto the crush cart. So always place something there. So we have the top bag, right? It's closed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the bottom bag, right? I'm going to close it. I'm going to put this in the sink, and I'm going to connect it here. Right, I want to make sure my connections are very tight. Right, so all my connections are tight, and I have no kinks. This clamp is open, this clamp is closed, and now we're slowly going to open this clamp at the top bag, and with gravity, we're going to fill, right, all these veins, or essentially the tubing, so that the system becomes pressurized. What you want to see is that the blood will start coming in here. Right. Once the blood is here and you get rid of all the air bubbles, then the system is fully flushed, and we are going to go ahead and close the bottom bag to keep the pressure and have the system pressurized. So I go ahead and I open the top bag, right, and you see how it's flowing. I want to make sure, right, I have all the air bubbles out. Right, so here it comes, and I see my bag starts to fill up. So I wanna let this run for a little bit to pressurize the system, and again to make sure all the air bubbles are gone. Because if you have air bubbles, they could create essentially kinks. So this amount is fine for me. I'm going to go ahead and close the bottom. And the reason why I closed the bottom is that now I have a pressurized system. Right. So if I were to introduce a catheter here, I should get flashback. Right. So this bag remains open, right? And this is where the gravity assists you. This bag, once you fill it up, right, a little bit, you're going to close it, right, to facilitate a flashback in your chamber. Now, we have different catheters. So here I have a 16 gauge. This is, I have a 14 gauge. We have a 24 gauge, 20 gauge, right? So which size do you want to use? So the manufacturer says, you could use any sizes. However, they recommend 20 to 25 gauge because this will extend the life of the skin and also extend the life of these veins, right, of this tubing. Yes, if the procedure calls for it, let's say if you're talking about cannulating someone with large bore IV, for example, for trauma, and you want to show them how to cannulate with a 16 gauge or 14 gauge, yes, you certainly can cannulate this test trainer with a smaller gauge. However, the manufacturer says that the life of this arm and the tubing will decrease, so you'll have to replace this and this much sooner. So for that reason, utilize, right, 20 to 25 gauge catheters. The next thing that I want to talk about is essentially what I mean, right, when I get a flashback. And also, besides the flashback, the student can get a positive confirmation when they aspirate or they pull back, right? So I'll show you how that looks. Right? So let me take a 20 gauge so you could see a clear visual representation. And when you're going to be teaching the skill, right, you're certainly going to show the students, right, that they put a tourniquet. The tourniquet will not, I repeat, the tourniquet will not stop the flashback. You'll still have it. So this is why I want to place this on, to show you that. Right, so I have my tourniquet on, and the students, right, are going to be using an alcohol prep to cleanse the site. You're going to teach him to do concentric circles, not like up and down, because this takes dirt from one side and introduces it right to the other side. What you're going to do is, once they palpate and they satisfied with the site they want to cannulate, right, you're going to tell them to perform concentric circles like so, away, right? So making the circle bigger and bigger. Do not have them blow on it, right? None of that. Let it air dry. You certainly want to have a sharps container, because once they introduce the catheter, they want to have to place the needle portion of it into the sharps. So certainly have a sharps container, right, available by your station. Here I have a flush. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to do the whole procedure of vein cannulation, but I want to show you what flashback looks like, right? So I have my catheter. So bevel up. So this is here is the 20 gauge catheter that I'm using, and what you're going to see once I cannulate, right? You're going to see this drip chamber. See if I put it closer so you guys can see. This drip chamber should fill up with the blood, right? So you're going to say keep the skin taut. Cannulate, insert down. So you see how it filled up? See how the blood is now in the chamber, right? So this is what I mean is the positive confirmation, right? That I have it here, right? So what you're going to tell the students is then, right, insert. And very important, you want to teach them to tamponade. If they don't tamponade, this is what's going to happen. See how the blood comes out? Put in the sharps container. If you don't tamponade, the blood is going to keep rushing out. So you're going to teach them, right, to tamponade the veins. Otherwise, the blood will keep coming out. Now, let's see if I connect my catheter, and should I get a positive confirmation, right, if I'm in the vessel. So I pull back. You see how it comes back? So definitely I have positive return, right? I have positive return here. So I know that I have definitely connected my my vessel. So then you could flush it forward, right? And secure your site, right? Use either a chevron, right, or a tegaderm for this, and they could use tape to further do that. I'm going to take this out for the time being because I don't need this anymore. Put this in the sharps container. The saline locks, I urge you to reuse because there's nothing wrong with reusing it for the next station. All right. However, the catheters, right, you certainly want to put in a sharps container after they're done. You want to, important thing that you want to do is throughout each attempt that the student goes, you want to keep cleaning the arm because this imitation blood, right, if you don't clean it, this will stain. And you see how some of it is, right, has this red staining. So if you don't continue cleaning the site, it will eventually stain. Yeah, you could wash it with some soap and water, but just to maintain, right, the equipment, you want a clean environment, right? And I already told you about placing some sort of chalk underneath it to absorb all the moisture, right, and all the blood, because this will certainly bleed, right? Now, what else I want to talk about that's important for here, right? So we talked about using the smaller gauge needles to prolong the life. We talked about heating these tubes here, right, in order to facilitate, right, the connections. We talked about closing the bottom, right, fluid to allow pressurized system so that you get flashback, as you saw me do it, right? Now, we removed all the air bubbles. And what we did was we allowed, right, the top bag to be open when we cannulate. However, when we are going to be doing IV drip infusion, so what I mean by IV drip, so when we are doing, let's say, a piggyback infusion, right, and you're going to be connecting your piggyback into your catheter, right, what you want to do is at this point you want to also close, right, the top bag. And the reason why you want to close the top bag and you definitely want to close the bottom bag is that if you have an IV catheter in this arm and now you connect it and you open your bag so that is infusing, right? So it's coming from here. If you leave these open, eventually it will dilute. It starts to dilute your bags. It will dilute either the top bag if it's open, or it will dilute the bottom bag if it's open. So this is why only for piggyback infusion or IV fluid infusion, if you connected your fluids, right, so it's running into the catheter, make sure you close both bags so that you don't continue diluting it. And I said, right, we're going to reuse this. We're going to put it back. So I don't want it to be super dilute. I don't want it to be very pale in color. So for a piggyback, we're going to close all these clamps, right, whenever the students are doing this. So this is for tips for your piggyback infusion. right? Closing both sides, right? However, for only cannulation, you want to have the top open. The next thing we want to talk about, right, is the cleaning procedure. So the students practice starting the IV access, and you are cleaning up the station. What you don't want to do is just disconnect this, throw this in a box, and put it on the shelf. The reason why is this blood, you saw me mix it, right? So this will not stay liquid when it dries up. What will happen is this will dry up and it will create deposits in this tubing. And if it creates deposits in this tubing, you will not be able to flush it. You're not going to get any flashback. So essentially, we would have to replace this entire line if this keeps going, right? So I'm going to show you how to properly clean it, right, and how to preserve your imitation blood that we created. And I also going to talk about some ways to preserve, right, the integrity of this. So when you're doing your piggybacks and IV fluid infusions, do not use a 1,000 ml bag. Use 500 or below. Why? Because as you see, right, the 1,000-liter bag, it will create higher pressure, right, in the system, right, if you're infusing IV fluid. So a higher pressure will reduce the life of, right, the tubing. So use a 500 bag or less. Do not run 1,000-liter fluids through this arm. Again, as I said, do not use a small gauge IV catheters. Another very important aspect, right, if you are employing right, any types of needles, right, do not employ a blunt needle for anything here, right? A blunt needle will further break up this tubing and the skin, right? So anything that goes through this, piercing through this, should be sharp, so like a catheter, right? And nothing blunt nose that that you're inserting through this. And so I'm going to show you how to clean it, and I'm going to show you some tips in case what happens if you do not get the flash, right? What you're going to do if you do not get the flash. So sometimes what you may have done is you connected the top bag, you connected the bottom bag, and you opened them both like this, and you forgot to close. You forgot to close them. So what happens now is essentially fluid will migrate from the top bag. You see how it's almost emptying? It's migrating from the top bag to the bottom bag, right? And if your bag fully fills and this becomes empty, you're not going to get any pressure, right, in the system. And if you try to cannulate, you're not going to be able to get flashback. So for this reason, right, you see how it's keeps flowing, and you have these gaps, right, in the tubing. So I need to close this if I want it, right, to facilitate flow. So if you see how the bag is emptying, and I'll show you once if this occurs, there's going to be very minimal, if any, flashback that you're going to obtain. So I'll take a catheter, right? So you see how it drained? Right? So this is a small gauge catheter, and I'm not seeing any flashback, right? Do not see any flashback. Put it in sharps. And just for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to take a 16 gauge, right, to show you if your thing ran out, you're not going to be able to get a flashback. Right? So nothing. No flashback in the system. So how would you remedy this situation at this point? So the way you would remedy this situation at this point is the following. I would close this bag, and then I will take this bag that was my top bag. Now this becomes my bottom bag, and this remains open. I now put this up on the gravity, and I go ahead and I reopen it and refill it. And again, as I showed you earlier, we're going to wait until this bag starts to fill up. And this system, I want it to get pressurized. So get all the air bubbles out. Right, now I close this bag to reestablish the pressure while the top bag is running. Right, let's see now if I get a flashback. See if you guys can focus on it. Right, you see the chamber filled up right away, right? And right away the blood comes out. So if this occurs, the remedy would be, right, to switch the bag's positions. The top bag goes at the bottom, and the bottom bag is lifted up, right, to the top. So now let me show you, right, now we finished the station. I want to clean the arm, so let me show you what I will do. First, I'm going to take these bags, right, and I want to close them. So there's no possibility of leakage. Make sure this is closed, and this is closed. Now, I bring this to the sink. I bring the whole cart to the sink because I don't want to have nothing, right, leaking. And then what I do is I take this arm and I put it in the sink. And if you had any blood on it, right, you could take a sponge, wet it, right, and clean it. So now my arm is clean. I bring both of these tubes close to the sink. And then what I'm going to do is, as this is closed and this is closed, right, I'm going to go ahead and open. So this is some of the blood, the fake blood that was inside the tubing. But this blood that's in here, I want to reuse. So what I want to do is I want to take my container, put both of them in here, and I want to open my clamps. So this, right, blood that I created, when I run the station again, right, let's say next week, I could easily just use this because all of this, right, will give me the color that I want, the consistency that I want. I already diluted it. There's no reason to pour this down the drain. Look at the color, you see? The color is almost identical to this color. And then I'll show you how we're going to go ahead and flush it. So I want to get all of it, right? All of it is here. Close my clamps. Get some tissue. All right, so this is going to be my reusable container. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to reconnect both of these to my arm. The reason why is that now I got to flush it. I got to flush the system. As I said, I don't want no deposition of anything, right, that will congeal or essentially clot. So I connect them. And what you want to actually run, you want to run a warm water. Right, you want to run warm water. So I'll take these bags, take this bag here, right, put it down into the sink, open this up, and run. Once I fill this up with some warm water, I'm going to lift it up, and I want to make sure now this water, right, runs through the system. And once it runs through the system, you will see it start to fill up in my other bag, right? So you see how it's filling up. And you see all of this that's coming out, right? This is essentially everything that was in the line. And if we leave this in the mannequin and the test trainer, what's going to happen is it will congeal, it will become hard, and then you will have kinks, right? You will have obstruction. You're not going to get any flow. So raise this higher. I'm gonna run this ideally until this is clear, right? Would you reuse this, right? You can reuse it, right? If the color is dark, if it's very light in color, I would then you would put this under the sink. But this certainly that I drained from both of the bags, I'm going to reuse, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this bag. So if I wanted to take it, I will put it in my bottle, right? So I'm going to run it until this is clear. And you could lift it up to assist with gravity. So, okay. So you see now it's coming out. It looks clear to me. And I check my tubing, right? The tubing looks clear. And you want to run it with warm water. Right, so you see it's coming out. So at this point, right, I will let this run, put this here for a second. And I'm going to disconnect my bag here, let it just run through the tubing. I'm going to wash it. So remove the tubing. See it's coming out clear, right? I'm going to let this entire bag infuse through all the tubing. And what I want you to do is basically clean this with warm water. Right, and run. So once you clean it, you could use a sponge, right? If there's any remaining blood, right? Once I clean it, this is another important thing. You want to hang them. Do not close any clamps, right? You want to hang them. I'm going to show you, right? We have a stock room, right? Where you're going to actually hang it. And another important thing, you see these clamps, you want to make sure they're open. So they don't cause any kinks, because if you leave it like this, right? If you leave it like this to dry, it will certainly, leave this consistent kink in the tubing. So let it open, right? You could rotate where you close these clamps, right? Let it dry. My bag infused fully, so I want to clean it too, right? Take this, bring it over. And then I disconnect here. And let it drain out. So this is done, right? So I'm going to hang it this. Now, what you're going to do with this arm. So if there was any blood, I will you can use the sponge to further clean it. Take some tissues or paper towels. I'm going to put this upside down to facilitate all the drainage. And then I want to clean the arm. Right? If if there's anything remaining, you want to make sure it drains out. So this arm is going to go into the container, right? And you notice I have placed some towels in here to absorb moisture, right? And when you place this arm in here, right, you want to make sure there's some paper towels, right? So this doesn't leak all over. I wouldn't start tying any knots, because if you start doing any of this, right, I'm going to compromise this tubing. So I don't want to put any knots here. I know I flushed it. It's clean. I put paper towels to absorb it, right? If you have any remainder of the blood, just use, right, the sponge to clean it, and use some paper towels to absorb all the moisture, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to let it air dry, right? Once it's air dry, you're going to go ahead and put it back into the storage, right? These bags are going to be hanging on a storage rack, right? We clean them, make sure these clamps are open, right? So that kinks like this do not form, right? Move them around for that reason. And so now what I saved my blood so I can reuse it later. This is the new blood that we made, so this will last us a good portion of the class. I labeled this. You could label this too, right? So from 1921, so that we know when it's from. When this starts to become super light, what you can do is you could add a more concentrated solution in here, right? But don't routinely dump the entire contents of your bags. You're costing a lot of money to go down the drain, right? And some tips, right? What happens if you connect it and even though you pressurize right, you close the bottom, it's not running. So what can happen is if you did not or someone else did not clean this properly, you may have build up, right, sediments here. So what you want to do is connect both of these bags and run warm water for several minutes. So I would just run water through the arm to clean any sediments. Once that's done, you're good to go, right? So after this, right, you will basically put all your equipment away. Right, make sure you trash everything that needs to be trashed. The sharps containers, right, make sure you only put sharps in here. Do not put any garbage into your container.